Hello, Bibiana, multi-award winning best-selling writer. Delighted to be chatting with you, myself and Steve Evans here.
Very nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show today, you guys.
It's a
Hi,
pleasure.
Bibiana. Really good to meet you finally. Terry's told me a little bit about you. Now, just talking about your excellent website for a minute, Black Callie's X Books, isn't it? I think. But anyway, it says you live in the Deep South. And we've heard you on one of your interviews talking about living in farmland in Michigan with parents. So whereabouts are you in the Deep South?
In Savannah, Georgia. Savannah.
Right, okay. And is there a farm there as well?
No. I
Am I
actually
getting
grew
mixed
up.
up?
Yeah, see, I grew up on a farm with a
Ah,
bunch of sisters and brothers, and I didn't realize how much it really affected me, how much it really influenced me. And I've lived in cities, I've lived in a lot of places, but the funny thing is I always kind of go back to my roots. And when you drive outside of Savannah 50 miles, it is like country. I mean, like there's nothing but you and maybe a buzzard and some trees. There's nothing.
brilliant, brilliant. So, what's the weather like today? It's really nice and sunny here, but it's a bit windy and a bit cool. But I'm expecting you to tell me you've got a bit warmer weather than us.
Well, this morning it was really cool. It was like 40 degrees or something when I woke up.
Wow,
And
wow.
I worked out super fast this morning outside. And by the time I got home, it was in the 80s. And right now it's pouring down rain and I think it's still 80. So it's like a Turkish sauna right now.
Ah,
Kind
I'm going to
of
say, so
kind of
you're
normal.
yeah, you're slightly warmer than we've got it at the moment,
Yeah.
but we've got a lot of sun and you've got the rain. Oh well, fair enough, fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. Bibiana, we had a brief chat on Twitter where you told me about the name Bibiana. I was brought up as a Catholic, but I hadn't heard of a Saint Bibiana. Can you tell us what you know
Hmm.
about the saint?
Well, she is the patron saint of hangovers, which I find kind of hilarious. She hasn't helped me any, and I'm named after her, so I don't know. But there's actually a new bar and restaurant or something up in Minnesota that's actually called Saint Bibiana, and I mean it looks pretty heavy duty. I haven't been to it yet, but
Yeah.
they're obviously going on that sort of that side of the saint, but basically Saint Bibiana, her sister Demetria, and her mom and dad were all sainted. So it's like a whole family of saints. I guess they were running out of room on the Catholic calendar, and they just were like, let's create a few more.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, though, I really hated my name. I felt like my parents basically, put like a target on my head for
Like
kids to
like
make
a
fun
boy
of
named Sue.
me. And yeah, exactly. And it just it's a hard name to have when you're a kid, because kids are, they do stupid things
Yeah.
when they make fun of each other anyway. But yeah, it's just a weird name to go through childhood with. But now it's my name, and that's what it is. So I'm just gonna, suck it up and get used to it.
It's a beautiful name.
So, does it? Yeah, I like it actually, but
Yeah.
do
Thank
people
you.
shorten it a lot to Bibby, or do you accept that as
Usually,
well?
well, when I was a kid, everybody called me BB. But when I was about 12, I think I decided I didn't want anybody to call me that unless I gave them permission. And as a rule, as an adult, whoever it is that decides to call me BB is the least likely person for me to choose to call me that.
Hmm.
So it's, like it's like a little thing that gets under your skin and makes you a little, it's like a
Yeah.
paper cut.
No, fair enough. Just out of interest, really. But yeah, because we all get shortened names, don't we? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how short your name is, people always shorten it even more so. Or we find that in this country,
I call
Right,
you
particularly in
Steve.
right.
Yeah.
Liverpool. Yeah, particularly in Liverpool, we shorten everyone's name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's you have to make a conscious effort not to at times. Anyway, um, you've got an awesome 29 titles on Amazon. How do you find time for any hobbies, or do you have any hobbies besides obviously outside of writing?
I'm a gourmet cook, so my family's happy for that, especially during the pandemic. we were eating like kings, and everybody else was eating like soggy takeout, you know. So my family was quite happy, but I wasn't writing as much because, of course, we were concerned, and everybody was at home, which normally they aren't when they get a little bit older. Like, you're lucky if you see them once a week. They're just kind of ghosts. But that is one thing I do. I travel as much as possible, because for me, what travel is like a automatic get out of domestic duties kind of card. So I'm allowed to have dirty laundry. I'm allowed to spend 3 hours drinking wine, staring out a window. And when you're when you're at home, like, some people would probably not be too thrilled with that kind of attitude.
You mentioned travel just then. You worked in aviation for many years.
I did.
Before going on to do a double master's
aviation
degree. Private aviation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So tell us what that means. I mean, I've never been on a private jet or any kind of private aviation.
Well, it's as cool as it looks.
Yeah.
And
life of luxury.
Yeah. It's, well, there's different levels of private jets. And when you're in the, private aviation, you certainly know the difference. So if you show me a picture of your jet on Instagram and you're trying to impress me, it better be the latest one with really fantastic winglets, or I'm not going for it. So I do know the difference. I do know the difference.
Yeah. But when you say worked in aviation, what part of aviation did you work in? Was it hosting on planes, or
you're flying the planes?
Well, actually, oh no, I'm not a pilot. I wish I was. I'm thinking about actually making that my next hobby.
Okay.
But now that we're empty nesters, we're just now, like this week, empty nesters. So my husband and I would both like to fly together. We'd like to have a small, just a general aviation kind of airplane that we can fly to the Bahamas, because we love the Bahamas.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty close here. It's not too far. But as far as private aviation, I worked for a private airline. That is, the only way you can fly on these jets is to actually pay a lot of money to this company, and it's a fractional thing, which means, like, we'll say you pay $1 million, you're considered an investor, and you get, we'll say, 50 flight hours for that $1 million. And within 4 hours, when I was working in the operations department, we would scramble a private jet, get a crew, get your catering. We would do everything that you wanted, whatever it was that you wanted. And we flew the most famous people on the planet. I can't say who they are because I had to sign an NDA when I worked for this company, but literally it is the who's who of movie stars, politicians, religious figure, just everybody.
Wow.
So I knew what everybody was up to.
There's got to be a book in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Memoir.
There probably is. There are a few, just even talking about pilots.
But you couldn't mention names, could you? Because you'd have to be so and so did this, and
I could get in trouble for that. Yeah.
My mind's working away here, thinking what happened.
Oh, I can imagine.
Well, just sometimes the funnest thing was, you think somebody, right? And because they're a public figure, and then you see, like, on the manifest that the only thing that they drink is like Hires root beer, and they absolutely have to have like 7 sticks of Wrigley spearmint gum, and it has to be lined up like in a T, or you're just like, what? Where do these people come up with this stuff? And that's what they get, though. That's exactly what they get, because when you're spending that kind of money and you're dealing with like more of a concierge kind of situation where you're flying people around the world, you give them whatever they want within your legal capabilities of doing. And I say legal, not loosely.
Okay.
Yeah. You get the same in the film industry or in music halls when, artists want, or they demand, you give me my dressing room and I want 7 bottles of this and 2 blackcurrant sherbets or whatever, That's the sort of thing it is. It's really strange, isn't it? So but you're obviously used to that. It's the same with
Yeah.
the aviation industry. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it gets pretty weird sometimes, for sure. And other times you're just like, wow, this person's so cool. And sometimes the best part is that person who's like really famous that you actually really admire and like is actually just as cool as you think they are. And that doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's very cool.
Brilliant. Cool. From there, you went to do a double master's degree in creative writing and fiction. It's a big jump between.
Well, I don't know. You know, like when you're working in with the super wealthy, a super successful group of people, almost everything is really storytelling. It really is. It's storytelling in the idea that this person has never heard the word no. So when you've never heard the word no, which I know is really hard for a normal person to conceptualize, what you have to do is on the end of trying to accommodate this person, find ways to, you know, sort of put them in a holding pattern, so to speak, so you can accomplish whatever this is. Because certain groups of people, you know, really super elite groups of people, don't really understand that the entire world is not waiting at attention to give them every single thing that they want right now. Like, I can't read your mind. So how would I know that you wanted a lobster salad when you went to Cancun, you know, if you didn't tell me? So, you know, the storytelling aspect comes in with sort of like not a lie, but sort of a redirect and some imaginary fluffiness to make everything happy. And then, you know, we're on our way. And maybe the villain is time, or maybe the villain is, you know, the fact that you can't get that French champagne that, you know, only so-and-so owns in their estate or whatever.
That's the conflict in the fiction. Yeah.
Right.
With all this travel you've done over the years, world travel, has that helped you, or has it influenced your writing and helped you broaden your outlook?
Oh, definitely. I mean, a lot of times when I've actually probably had better experiences with meeting people and really sort of immersing in culture when I'm by myself. So for a long time, I was on my own. And when I was on my own and I was traveling, you know, just wherever I wanted to go, I would sometimes meet people on trains, on airplanes, and they'd invite me to like a wedding. And I mean, I just met this person like an hour ago. We had 3 beers on an airplane, and all of a sudden I'm going to a wedding, you know? And, you know, I don't care. Why not? I mean, it was, you know, if something's going to happen to you, honestly, it could happen to you just as easily nowadays in a grocery store as it could, you know, meeting a stranger on a plane and going to a wedding, right? So why not? And, you know, I mean, I always ask, you know, do you guys have an open bar or a cash bar? So I have to like check the numbers, you know, but I really think that traveling, what it really does is it makes you open to things. It makes you curious and aware. And as a woman, you know, traveling by myself, I'd have to say that you have to be aware, you know, have to be paying attention to where you're going and what you're doing. And I don't speak every language in the world. So sometimes I'm in some, you know, crazy place. I don't speak the language, and you have to be able to like read people's body language and decide whether or not they're, you know, apple, lemon, or banana. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And, you know, like the guys with no hair wearing leather with chains, chaining their friend up to the bumper of a car in Budapest, who decided that I was going to be the next person, I'd have to say those guys weren't good ones.
What an image.
Amazing.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
How many languages do you speak?
Well, I used to speak French pretty fluently, but it's so rusty. There are no French people that I know of in Savannah at all. So it's like super rusty, but I listen to like French music and can read, you know, French books, French literature. But I speak bar Spanish, So I can say, get your hands off me, and like, what do you mean you don't have 2 beers? Stuff like that.
Por favor.
Right, right. And I might know a few swear words in
It's essentials.
in right. I might know a few swear words in more than one language, but it's mostly, I would say, American English is my primary. So
Okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, should we let's move forward and talk about your books?
Sure.
I mean, you've got 29, so we could start anywhere, but maybe we focused on the first and the latest one. So we'll have a little chat about Carolina Spirit, which was 2015. And then your new one, or your latest one, is Quantum Sea, which is this short story, I believe, about the future. But that's not out yet, is it? That's due out in a month or so.
Right, May 5th, it's coming out. It's on pre-order right now on Amazon, but yeah, it's raring to go.
Okay, so Carolina Spirit was your first one.
It was.
Is that majorly different to this short story? Are they completely different contrasts?
Totally, and other end of the spectrum. Carolina Spirit, what's really funny is when I was 4, I decided I wanted to be a writer. I had my whole life planned out. I decided I was going to be a ballerina, then I was going to be a novelist, and then I was going to be an environmental attorney to save what's left of nature when I turn 75. We'll see, if that happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, Carolina Spirit it's so wild how it got me started. I think I was a little scared to start writing, and I was driving in South Carolina with my family, and suddenly I saw a girl. I mean, like I could see her, like I can see you guys, on the side of the road running barefoot, like on the side of the marsh. And we were going to this island that is just really super special. And it was like my mind's eye, though, you know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to explain. It was like a really bizarre experience because I was drinking like a frozen Coke. The kids were in the back fighting about who was going to get to use which hammock. I mean, it was like, typical family summer kind of thing. And suddenly I was having an experience. And, I watched her, this young person, like I could see the mud coming off the back of her toes even. Like, that's how vivid this was. And I asked my family if they saw her, and they said no. And they were like, like heat stroke. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I didn't say anything else. And 2 or 3 days later, I had a dream. And this girl was in the dream. And she asked me if I was going to do it. And I was like, in my mind, like I'm having a conversation while I'm dreaming with this image. And I realized that the things that she'd been saying as she's running along the side of the car was the opening chapter of Carolina Spirit. I had an interaction with a ghost. And that's how my first book came about, because her bravery gave me bravery.
Wow, that's quite powerful image, that.
It was wild. My family made fun of me like crazy the entire day at the beach. They're like, woo, anything else going on? And I'm like, you just leave me alone, you guys.
Wow. Yeah. You write mysteries and paranormal, a mixture of genres.
Yeah.
Plus, you've collaborated with other writers, for instance, for Gender in Fiction, and with Veronica Klein Barton for The Haunted. How does this work, the collaboration? Do you each agree on a particular chapter or a particular section of the work?
Well, in the Haunted series with Veronica Klein Barton, which, by the way, the entire series is award-winning. We're on the entire series. We're on year 4 right now. We're actually working on them right now. And what happens is it's an anthology. Okay. So it's a paranormal anthology. So she has 3 stories. I have 3 stories. And what we do is we come up with a common theme that threads through the entirety, but we get to decide what that means. And we get to decide where the setting is, who the characters are. So she writes 3, I write 3, and then we swap them, and we give each other feedback and critique, and we try to improve them as best we can. And then we send them to an editor and kind of just go from there. And we either accept or decline we have two different editors.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends. We take creative liberty over what we're doing. So if we don't agree with what the editors say, then we override it and we keep going because we know what these stories need to say. We're that strong in kind of the creation of this particular series.
Okay.
If you're reading yourself, then what do you read, and what was your influences in your writing? Or firstly, what do you read yourself?
Well, I actually read almost like every genre you can imagine. I deeply dislike erotica. Sorry, erotica people, but I just do. It doesn't,
Fair enough.
you know, I know how everything works. I don't need a how-to guide. So, that doesn't really do anything for me, but and I really don't read Westerns, but probably because I read every single book that Louis L'Amour wrote one summer when I was stuck up north and it rained like every day. And I was lucky to be in a place that had every Louis L'Amour novel like on shelves all the way around this Airstream. So I read every single one. And he was fantastic writer. And Zane Grey, also a fantastic Western writer. But so I've kind of like got that out of my system, I guess. But as far as like reading, what I really prefer are multi-genre kind of books that don't really hold themselves to a certain limit. Like Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House is probably one of my favorite scary haunted mansion stories of all time. I just think she was a genius, an absolute genius. And anybody who hasn't read that story that likes ghost stories, I mean, like, what are you doing? You need to buy that book. But I also love science fiction. And the kind of science fiction that I like is more of like the kind of mundane science fiction. Like, you don't have to take me off Earth. I don't have to go to another planet and have aliens with like, heads that look like mushrooms or 3 eyeballs or whatever. I don't need to do any of that because what I would prefer to see is what's going to happen in the future. What is it going to look like when I'm not here anymore? Will there be cities? Will there be no cities? Will there be only 2 humans left and like 3 million cockroaches? I mean, like, what's going to happen? And I guess I'm interested in that. I'm very curious about that.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating, actually. Yeah.
Bibiana, another string to your bow is your YouTube channel, Black Callie X Books. Tell us about that. You make book trailers on there, don't you? And your design work shines through there.
Yeah, what happened was when I was working on the master's degrees, I had 2 teens in my house, diametrically different teens. So a lot of drama.
I can imagine.
And I was taking on this endeavor and trying to keep everything normal, and still doing all of this, online modules and keeping up with like 24-year-olds that were in the same class with me and that kind of stuff. And anyway, what happened is the muse went completely crickets for me. And I was in the middle of writing like this ridiculously long historical fiction novel for my creative thesis, which ended up being, I don't know, 115,000 words. And so in the middle of it, like, my muse, complete crickets. I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? I've already paid for this class, got the drama, and everybody's expecting me to be just like fabulous. Like, what do I do? And what ended up happening was I opened up one of those cheap free video things and started making like these little sort of doodads of how I saw the characters in the historical novel I was writing. And suddenly I realized that my muse was like, yes, here you go. Here you go. Here you go. And I was like, oh my God. And so what ended up happening is I made like the worst book trailer you've ever seen in your entire life, because it was all free stuff and little clippings, and I didn't know how to do shading. I knew nothing. And that actually got me to the end of that project. And so I realized that images and video, and even just, we'll say like vision boards and things like that, when you're having trouble and you've got a lot of external things going on as a creative person, if you immerse yourself in that, you can actually maybe find the key to open the door to get back to that place you need to be without losing your mind, without getting completely drunk like people do in films when they're writers and they're having trouble writing, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's not a harmful way to
Yeah.
like get to that muse.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I do them, because I feel like they are integral to my creative process now.
Have you pitched to Netflix or any TV companies with any books or anything like that come up in the pipeline?
Well, I actually have been kind of preparing. I've been kind of sharpening my axe for the Netflix and the Hulu thing. I'm actually working on a novel right now with a movie studio, and we're doing something kind of different. Like the person who owns the studio, the director, and I are co-writing a novel, and literally we're co-writing it.
Brilliant.
And it's really interesting because he had a very short film that he won some prizes for, and he decided that he wants to basically have like the full suite. So he wants to have a novel to go along with this, and while we're building the novel, we're also building the screenplay. So it's the process completely in reverse of what most people do, and it's taken much longer than I expected it to take. But our first draft is out, and now we're in chapter 4 of what we do is now we're doing a weekly meeting with revisions of each chapter, and we're actually on the phone using technology, so we don't pay for phone calls because he's in Spain and I'm here in the States. And it's just really, really interesting. And he's actually making friends right now with some other producers in Europe who have some pretty heavy hitting friends who are investing in Amazon Prime and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think the future is going to be really amazing, and I'm knocking on wood. I don't know who's going to see what or how it's going to go, but I'm super open to these collaborations because I think that the most beautiful thing any of us can do as writers is to figure out ways to get our work in front of a new audience.
Yeah.
And you know, letting go of some of that creativity with a director or with someone who's producing a film it's from a novelist aspect, from my aspect, it's not easy, because you have this vision in your mind and you have the characters in your mind, and they might have something very, very different in your mind. So what I would say to anybody who's doing these kind of collaborations is to realize that when you go to a film or when you go to TV, you know, be very, very aware that you are a very small part of this project, and that the actors are going to interpret, the director is going to interpret, you know, even the score. It might be music that you absolutely would never listen to, but you have someone who's spent their entire life maybe making music, who, you know, probably knows better than you do what people would want to hear with a certain image moving in front of the screen. So giving up that control, if you start as a writer and you haven't been in the other side of it, I think that is the absolute hardest thing, is not getting really upset that someone else sees this in a different way than you do. And that's where the importance of that sort of creative sort of flexibility comes in. So you don't get upset and you actually realize someone's just trying to do something amazing with something that was amazing beforehand, just not quite the same. So
you mentioned to me on the little brief chat that we had on your bucket list that your wish is to have a retreat in Scotland with a chef and a butler.
yeah,
so that you can drink too much and take ghost walks around the castle.
absolutely.
That sounds wonderful.
Sounds awesome.
Why
Sounds
Scotland? Why a castle?
Yeah, why Scotland? Yeah.
Well, the creative thesis I was talking about, before I even started grad school, my family and I took a trip to Ireland, England, and Scotland.
Yeah.
And I was kicking around ideas already for what I wanted to do. And I just fell in love with Scotland. I fell in love with the Highlands. It's so crazy wild up there. I mean, like literally you could throw a ball and it could roll downhill, pop over the top of Ben Nevis, and you would not see another person. And it is awesome. And it's not awesome because I don't like people, but it's awesome because it's like, if you yell at the top of your lungs, literally, you're this small. It's like, you just realize how little you are in this magnificent, amazing world. And the Highlands they're just so different than almost anywhere else I've ever been. And we were lucky enough, we rented a cottage with Airbnb, and it's owned by this Russian couple. So they don't even live in Scotland. They're there like in the summer or whatever. And it's an old milking shed, like an old milking barn in the middle of a 10-mile valley. And it was ours. It was ours.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, like in America, having 10 miles in a valley with your own, your own burn, which is a creek in Scotland, and tall grass and wild hares and crazy sheep trying to break down the fence every 5 minutes, and everything else is going on. It was just fantastic. So for me, I think because of the inspiration that I got from being there, I can't imagine, especially if you've never traveled anywhere like that before, and you're in a cool old castle that might have a history, of some kind, which I think they probably all do. Walking around, drinking, your little, what is it, healing waters every night.
The whiskey.
Right?
Yeah.
Water
of life.
Perfect. It'd be perfect. And I think it would lead to all kinds of really cool Gothic stories that people would be very engaged in reading, because, I mean, you can't ignore the atmosphere when it's like that. I mean, it's like in the mist, and it's just, I mean, seriously, you just want to lay face down and say, just leave me here.
Brilliant. That's a wonderful image. Yeah.
And on that note, Terry, I think we're done.
We are, I think time's caught up with us, Bibiana.
Time.
I could happily chat with you for all day and night if you didn't mind.
Thank you.
that was superb.
Really, really interesting.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely.
But, Bibiana, can we book another one when the film launches, or for the next release?
Oh, that would be absolutely amazing.